This PetroSkills PetroAcademy skill module discusses NEC-based electrical design, installation, and safety codes at the core level. This section introduces the module.
Now, this is a big question on what your interest is in doing a module on codes and regulations. There's probably not a more tired, kind of dry topic that you have out there. But in today's world, codes and regulations have become more and more important. When approaching codes and regulations, they appear to be shrouded in mystery. And so this module is an attempt to show you that the codes are arranged in a particular fashion to try and help you with applying the code. The codes have evolved over many years because of safety incidences that have occurred in the past. And OSHA, the Occupational Health and Safety Administration, federal agency, comes in to investigate. That agency is going to be inspecting that facility for code violations. And code violations are simply an inspector saying, here's what the book says, here's what you did. And if there's a problem, if nothing else, even though it may not have led to the injury, the problem is recorded and you're sometimes penalized economically for that. So why do I care? You care for personal safety, equipment safety, and hopefully not having penalties from an agency. It is very often difficult to apply a code when you have no idea what the code means or what it's trying to tell you, and your solution at that point might give you or not be the best for your money. So regulatory groups have worked extremely hard throughout the years, and these are groups both in the U.S. and elsewhere to try and bring codes together such that they don't conflict with each other. Codes are awkward, codes are sometimes dry and benign, but there's a purpose and meaning behind them, and the biggest one is safety of personnel, followed by safety of equipment. In the National Electrical Code, there are rules for choosing the size of a conductor. Oh, that sounds like it ought to be fairly basic and fairly simple. It's just that the National Electric Code says that depending on the application for the conductor, you have to throw in an adder of 125%. So you would have to understand what your application is in applying the code in order to make sure that the wiring itself has been sized so its minimum size meets the requirement of the code. Now, why is that particular factor in there? Well, the factor is because over the years, fires have been created because wiring has been too small. And so for electrical work, your codes then try to keep you from having fires. The impact of improperly applying the codes typically is felt through some kind of incident or problem that has occurred that's the result of poorly applied codes. In an explosion-proof enclosure, by the code, the explosion-proof is defined as a device that can contain the explosion and not ignite something on the outside. And you would say, well, the probability of having combustible vapor in the enclosure, an ignition source in the enclosure, and a combustible vapor on the outside of the enclosure, that's too small. I don't need to worry about that. But the answer is it's in the code because there have been incidences where poorly designed electrical equipment caused explosions on the outside of the enclosures. And so essentially, so what is the business impact? Wow, the business impact is it could be personnel are injured, process is somehow degraded either momentarily or for a longer period of time because of loss of equipment. And if nothing else, what's happened is if somebody does an assessment and it's found out that the codes were not followed, you kind of get a black eye about not doing things well. And so your ability to be called a constable or a good operator is diminished. What are the safety impacts? Well, what do you think they might be? For instance, how do you work if you happen to be in your swimming pool? Why do I talk about a swimming pool when this is a company kind of topic? I talk about the swimming pool because awareness of electrical codes applies not only at work, it applies elsewhere. And one of the places is in your home life. So if you're in a swimming pool and the sky is not cloudy, and all of a sudden you hear a thunder strike, what do? Well, if you understand the code and you understand other regulations, you would probably exit the pool. And the reason is that thunder typically happens after lightning, and lightning can actually occur 10 miles in front of the thundercloud. And so even though you don't see a cloud in the sky, it's around. So just aware that this kind of thing can happen from a safety standpoint will keep your family safer. This is an example of applying codes properly and not just trying to go with your sound engineering practice in your mind, what's acceptable with that. So sometimes the codes will come up against what has been done in the past, and making the change is sometimes difficult, but you just need to be persistent with keeping the newer codes involved, because the codes were changed because there were incidences, and keeping those newer codes installed will lower your risks of having people and equipment damage.
I have copies of the relevant codes, so can't I just read them and be safe? You could, but code interpretation is not easy. A code is a set of rules that serve as generally accepted guidelines recommended for the industry to follow. They exist for the purpose of safety, quality, or other benefit. For example, electrical codes exist to ensure system reliability and that building occupants are safe from shock risks. Regulations are basically how to apply and verify codes. According to the National Fire Protection Association, NFPA, a standard tends to be a more detailed elaboration, the nuts and bolts of meeting a code. A code tells you what you need to do. A standard tells you how to do it. Examples include voluntary IEEE 142 commercial power systems, mandatory OSHA 1910 health and safety in the workplace. Reading the code is not the same as knowing, and knowing the code is not the same as understanding the code. Simply stepping back and putting everything in context rather than digging into the details sets you up for long-term success. You can often go years applying codes, sometimes improperly, without actually understanding why. You don't know what you don't know. Do you know which codes and standards are out there? Do you know which ones apply to your work? Do you know what all the words mean? Are you sure? Are you sure you are applying concepts correctly as intended? Without some context and understanding of the structure, scope, and precedence, you can easily misapply concepts.